Welcome to the DATAcated Show. My name is Kate Strashny. I'm the host of the DATAcated Show and founder of DATAcated. Today, we are going to talk about how data leaders can get the control of the narrative in 2024. My special guest of this show, by the way, this is the 8th show out of the 100 shows I plan to do this year. Super excited that we're really moving things along. We've got some really interesting guests lined up. Today, you're going to hear from Aaron Wilkerson. He's the Senior Manager of Data Strategy and Governance at Carhartt. I'll bring him on in just a minute, but as you're joining, I just want to remind everybody that this is an interactive show. So if you've got questions while we're talking, don't worry, you're not going to interrupt us if you type in a comment and ask a question into either LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. We will gladly engage and interact. Now, the topic that we're going to talk about is how data leaders can control the narrative in 2024. And it's essentially going to hit on points like moving the data team away from being a support role to bring them with like a seat at the table, right? So bringing them into the conversations. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring up our guest, but as you're joining the show, just say hello in the comments and we'll try to engage with as many live members as possible. All right. Aaron Wilkerson, welcome to the DATAcated Show.
Hello, Kate. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely glad to have you. And first question is, let's show us your shirt, man. I mean, you can't not talk about the shirt. What are you wearing?
Oh, so this is a gift from my friend Ryan and Eric Dolly. They're the Super Data Brothers. So I was at the Data Day Texas conference 2 weeks ago, and I've been a guest on their show a couple times. So I was given this T-shirt. So definitely want to show some love to those guys and some of the great stuff they're doing by wearing their shirt. Also, it's cool. I don't have any actual like data shirts. It's actually I think the first like data related shirt I've ever gotten before. So that's really cool.
Well, guess what? I'm gonna have to send you a DATAcated shirt after the show. So I'm gonna follow
Awesome.
up with you. I'm making a note. And yes, shout out to the Super Data Brothers. I actually had Ryan Dolly as the first guest of the year for the DATAcated Show. So glad to see they come back at the 8th show in the form of a T-shirt.
There you
Now,
go. And I will definitely wear your shirt on the next one I'm on too.
oh, perfect. So, Aaron, before we get into the topic, I think let's give you a couple minutes to talk about your career. What does your typical day look like, and some of your accomplishments in the past, let's say, 10 years or so.
Yep. So I've been fortunate enough to be involved in the data industry for my entire career. Studied engineering in college, then decided I didn't want to do engineering, so I got into IT. So did a little bit of consulting. Then got into more of a data technologist. So used to work on business objects, Bob J back in the day. Then got involved with data warehousing, ETL, data architecture. Then continually kind of moved my career from technology to architecture, and now been in data leadership for the past 10 years. So been in many different roles in the data space. I've done leading data engineering teams, BI teams, now in a governance, strategy type of role. So like I said, I've done healthcare, consumer goods, now I'm in retail, fashion, apparel. So many different industries, but at the end of the day, it's data. You're dealing with people, transactions, products, services. So I've had a lot of fun the past 16, 17 years of my career.
I think we should have asked which industries have you not worked with. Might have been simpler than where have you
I
done work, because it looks like you worked with everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably financial services is probably the only one I haven't, or like startups, sort of like
Hmm.
startups. So, but many other ones, like I said, healthcare, consumer goods, all different types of areas I've worked in. But like I said, you have, even though different industries, you're really kind of selling a core product or service, and you have those supporting functions around that kind of operational lens of it. So that's the good thing is you kind of have a different flavor of different organizations and businesses.
Yeah, and I had Monica K. Royale on the show a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about the fact that you can take your data skills cross industry, cross sector, and apply the same skills to different type of companies. And you're the great example of actually doing that in real life. Can you talk about, was it difficult for you to industry hop with the data skills that you had?
It is because different businesses are different, of course. So the language and how they provide value to their customers, and automotive, a lot of their products are more like in the future, right? So they're doing programs for a year or two in the future, if you work in sometimes in like consumer goods, like they have direct to consumer, so they're selling right now to their customers. Healthcare is tricky because like when you try to budget, like it's hard to kind of forecast who's going to get sick or how many procedures you're going to have. So it's a little bit trickier of a business. So I mean, I think some of the speak is different. Some of the terms, technology, and industry different around just who are their customers, what problems do they solve in the marketplace. So I think that's kind of the trickiest part of those first 6 months, just trying to understand just what does this company do, why do they exist, how do they make money. But then you kind of go back to you have marketing, you have sales, you have operations, you have revenue. They may call revenue different things. You kind of have those core concepts to a business. You just kind of having to apply it to a different industry or marketplace or customer base.
Do you have any tips that you can share of how you can speed up, like within that 6-month process? Anything that somebody can do as they're transitioning from one industry to another? Is it talking to stakeholders? Is it just like sitting down and reading something on the in the company website? What's your go-to method?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I think it's a high touch game. It's meeting with a lot of different stakeholders. If your company is public, you have the benefit where all of the earnings calls usually have a transcript, so you can go and read. This is what the CEO talked about. This is what they're saying the strategy is. So public companies have the benefit to learn pretty quickly just about that industry. But usually I say there's really 3 core questions: is why does a company exist? How do they make money? And then what's that operating model around, like how do they deliver value to the customer? So I think if you frame kind of the conversations to stakeholders with those, and you quickly understand and get up to speed around like, okay, how does supply chain fit in the operations and how do they provide value? How does marketing? How does those customer service? So I think you kind of understand the different parts of it, but kind of asking a couple core questions helps you connect the dots.
Absolutely. It's almost like you saw into the future. Jordan just asked that literal same question of what questions would you ask to get to know the business better. Those 3 are really great. And I'm sure you'll get slightly different answers from different stakeholders, right? So you sort of have to come back and analyze the responses that you get to get this common understanding.
Right. I mean, that's when you get into kind of prioritization, because what's important for one group may be important for different. So that's the tricky part. And I probably get into that is just, operations may be thinking about like, how do we reduce costs? How do we, make sure we get profitability? The sales group is thinking about growth, but they're like, I'm just trying to get, I'm trying to convert more customers into or more prospects into actual paying customers. So you get different priorities, but they're going after the same goal. They're just going about it differently, which kind of makes it a little bit tricky because then you have to kind of understand or kind of read between the lines.
Yeah, exactly. So we're here to talk about how data leaders can actually control the narrative. So let's start with just a discussion on why is it important for data leaders to control the narrative?
It's something that I've been working on for a little bit, just as a data leader, looking into how I want to manage my own personal career. I use a phrase, you need to be more strategic. That's a mantra that I've heard a lot.
What does that even mean, right? Be strategic.
Right. And then you kind of wonder about what that means. So I think that's kind of how you dig into the narrative of, okay, what is my role here at the company? Why does my team exist? How do we provide value to organizations? So I think that those are all kind of narratives that you have to make sure is understood, because there's always a narrative being told. It's either you're telling it or someone else is telling it. So you want to be in front of that. So you want to tell the narrative yourself in terms of, hey, this is why our group exists. This is what we're doing. This is how we're structured. This is how we're providing value. So there's all different forms of narratives that you want to get in front of, because if you don't, someone's going to define that for you, and they have much less visibility and they know less about what you're doing versus you. So I think getting in front of that really helps you in your career and how you want to progress and help the organization.
Yeah, I love that. And they might not always have your best interest in their mind when they're trying to control that narrative. In terms of controlling the narrative and business strategy, right? How do you think you can leverage the actual business strategy to define your own role as a data leader?
I'll say that's the tricky part. A lot of companies I've been at, the business strategy isn't apparent. It's hard to find it. One thing I do like about Carhartt is that they do have it where it's more available, kind of what the company and corporate strategy is. But when you don't have that, you kind of have, like we talk about those meetings with business stakeholders to say, okay, what are you working on? Why is this important? What are you hearing about, business priorities? So I think the first part is trying to get at the business strategy and figuring out who the stakeholders you have to work with, who do you have to talk to. So first off is understanding that, and then once you understand that, is backing into, okay, how do we fit into this? How are we helping this part of the organization out? How are we defining value? How are we delivering value? How does our team fit into the world? So those are all kind of type of thing. But the big part at first is figuring out what is a business strategy and how do you get to that business strategy, which can be tricky, because I remember I was at an organization once where I was spending like 3 or 4 months meeting with someone in finance, just trying to back into the business strategy, because it was just more of a growth. Like, hey, we have 3% growth. We're just going to keep growing at 3%, doing the exact same things, which is their form of a business strategy, but it's not like a clearly defined business strategy. It's more like hey, this is our goal and this is how we're going to get to our goal. So that's the hardest part of trying to figure out what the business strategy is, because it's not always easy.
Yeah, I guess people always say, oh, make sure everything aligns with the business strategy. And sometimes you're right, it's not as clear cut where it's like, oh, this is it. And again, a lot of people would have a different definition and understanding of that business strategy. If you ask 10 different people, you might get 10 slightly different answers.
Right. I mean, the best you can have is, like I said, if you are a public company, your CEO does their quarterly earnings call with the board and the investors. So they have to line out like, okay, we're going after growth. We're going to go into new markets. We're going to work on existing markets. We're going to divest from this market. So I think that's more clear. But if you don't have that, it's we talk about business strategy all the time and empower the business strategy, but how to figure out what that is, that's a little more tricky.
Yeah. You're bringing me back to my corporate days when we had those all hands calls. Oh man, it was nothing was really said in those all hands calls. It was just so watered down and corporate that it was just like, we are here. We're going to do things. You're going to help us do things. We're going to be great in an hour.
Raise your hand and say, hey, can you give us a little more concrete? I mean, you never do that, but you always want to ask, like, can you give us some more specifics around what we're doing versus, okay, never mind. Just
Yes. So we're talking about moving the data team away from being a support role and sort of getting more of the front row seat. Why do you think it's such a bad thing to have the data team as, seen as a support role?
There's a couple different, I would say from a career perspective, you have team members who want to feel that the work that they're doing is important. They want to know how does what I do every day contribute to what the business is trying to do. So if I'm really excited about what the company's doing, if you're making cool products, delivering cool service, you want to know that what you're doing makes a difference, especially in this remote world where we're all at home. So if I'm at home every single day, I'm disconnected from my team. I want to know that what I'm feeling is very important. So if I feel like I'm being delegated to just more support or run the business type of tasks, like you kind of then think about, okay, what else is out there? Like, can I work for a company where I feel more value added? Also professional skills, like how are my technical or leadership skills going to develop over time? So I think getting more into those strategic parts, because that's where you work on like the new initiatives, the new priorities, trying to do that type. So I think just career is another one. Another one, just kind of more self-preservation, where if you look around the economy, like people are making cuts with different teams. Like data teams are losing people, like people are being laid off. So tying yourself to strategic initiatives gives you much more of a footing to kind of strengthen that you're a linchpin, that you report to the organization, that we talk about data team as a cost center, but you want to make sure that the stuff you're working on is going to benefit the organization, that they know that, hey, what you're doing is important, and we need to keep these people around, because there's no guarantees, there's no job security. So it helps you to kind of set the narrative and say, hey, like the company is kind of going after cost savings to get profitability. This is all the stuff that we're doing to help the company with cost savings. And you kind of have the narrative where it's like, yes, what they're doing is important. So those are some examples of kind of, I would think, why you want to make sure that you're connecting the narrative of what you're doing to like the business strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a follow-up question, I guess, is, are there any KPIs that you've seen or you use personally to sort of prove and reinforce the narrative of the importance of the data team and how they contribute to either cost savings, revenue increase, or basically the things that the company wants to accomplish?
Yeah, that's one of the big questions in our area, is how do we quantify
prove it, man?
How do you prove it? I work a lot in governance, so data quality is a big one. So we kind of back into the correlation of data quality has a big linkage to like orders, revenue. So the improved data quality in our product information really aligns to our like revenue, make sure we can sell. So we can say, as we improve data quality and whatever metrics we have for data quality, as that improves, that impacts the organization. So like that's some metrics. We talk about cost savings. It's you can talk about automation. So automation is a big one that people talk about efficiency, trying to go after efficiency. So thinking about my project is going after, we're doing 10 automations that's going to save 1,000 hours. That's going to save the company X amount of money. So we can potentially reinvest like those hours and resources into another project that saves us from having to go out and hire more people. So I think those are sometimes it's hard to have a direct one, but you kind of have indirect, but you can still make the linkage to them. But it's just that we're on this part, but it does have a direct linkage to these big corporate metrics. You just have to kind of make the connection and not assume that people know the value that you're providing.
I think that's the disconnect, because a lot of times we do assume that everybody just understands what we're doing and how that's adding value. And it's really the sort of the storytelling piece where you're explaining and spreading awareness about, hey, look what I did. And not many data teams, I think, do that very effectively, because they're like, I'm just doing my job.
Yeah, someone told me to work on this and I'm doing it. And so that's then that means that, like I mentioned, someone's setting the narrative. Like you're assuming that someone is speaking positively about you. You're assuming that someone's going to be like giving you credit when they talk about the project and all the benefits. But I don't know about you, but I don't want to kind of take that gamble. So I want to make sure that I'm advocating for myself and not hoping that someone's going to advocate and make that connection. Like I want to make sure I'm making the connection as well and getting in front of the leaders that need to know about it.
Right, especially something like data quality, where it's almost expected that data quality will be good, and it's sort of like, okay, great, you cleaned the data, like you were supposed to maintain it and you were supposed to have good quality data. But they don't understand that without that, they might not be able to, for example, see a clear picture of their customer journey, or just make the decisions that they're making based on the data, and how horribly wrong that can go if it's not accurate, if it's not based on accurate data. So absolutely, obviously there's so much value that the data teams provide. It's just a matter of tooting your own horn and speaking to more people about what you're doing. And I guess just being more strategic, be strategic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we definitely have a marketing problem in the data space. We don't, and I'm guilty of this. I'm working on this even recently. Is just we don't feel that we need to like sell our achievements. Like, we don't market and say like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on. I think we're a little more apprehensive to kind of, be our own cheerleaders, or even talk about the stuff we're working on or the value they're providing. So I think that's a huge one that I think there's opportunities there to just kind of become better marketers. Marketing is a huge group. We can learn a lot because they have tons of metrics that they use to align to business value. The question is, do they really have the impact? But they have a narrative around, okay, these are the metrics that we're doing around outbound leads, inbound, all these different lead funnels. Like they have something. So I think there's things we can learn from different functions.
100%. I'd say the number one function you can learn from is sales teams, right?
Yep.
Look what we did. Oh my God, we sold 80,000, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, okay, amazing. And everyone celebrates the sales team because they brought in money, but you don't see those email blasts from from the leadership saying, oh, look what the data team has cleaned up our data to X% of,
Yeah, they don't tell you about how we provided visibility into the sales funnel, or we gave them those metrics to show, okay, who are those people you haven't reached out to? And, when, you do using certain CRM tools, we have issues, like they work with us. So that's the part that, it's there's groups that provide a lot of value. We need to make sure that we kind of scooch in and kind of also find our place in the narrative too.
Yeah, definitely. So how would you suggest data teams get the business leaders excited and wanting to maybe learn more about data initiatives, or just being more involved in those data initiatives?
Yeah. I think one of the keys is it's understanding the language of business, and like for that stakeholder, what's important to them. I think many times we show up and talk about problems that we think exist, but the business doesn't connect with that. So the question is, okay, for a stakeholder, what are those challenges they have? What are the problems that they're facing? How does it tie to incentives? Because I mean, we're all humans. We go off of what we're incentivized by. So if we understand that these problems cause this stakeholder to not get their bonus or not be incentivized, they're going to care about the stuff that they're incentivizing. So I think understanding the problems, understanding those initiatives that they care about is first and foremost. Like you don't want to show up talking about, this new BI dash where you create or data quality. They don't know what that means. Like they know what they're working on. So they're
Yeah.
making sure that you talk in their terms, understand their problems is first, and then you give them solutions to that problem. Like that's where they're going to show up. But if you talk about stuff they don't care about, it's hard to get them to show up and be engaged on that too.
Yeah, definitely tying it to their incentives and what they can actually understand and relate to is important. And I wanted to touch on data literacy for a minute as well, because do you think that that's part of the reason why maybe data accomplishments are not as celebrated is because the business team does not really understand all of the different concepts and the how everything works and the
Yeah.
difficulties and complexities?
Yeah, I think it's the translation, right? We can talk about we created data pipelines, 100 reports, but unless we can connect those achievements to like what the group is working on, like what are their workflows, what are the processes, and how does the data initiatives we're doing connect to that? That's where I think the disconnect is, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where you need that translation. I think that's where you have, data leaders. I mean, I know product owners or product managers are starting to be talked about a lot with data. So I think that's where you need kind of the person or people to be in between to kind of make the connection. Because without that, I think that's where you see a lot of these initiative struggles to get adoption or stakeholder sign off or buy-in. It's just because no one's made no one's made that linkage between, okay, these are the 50 data products or 30 that we have, and this is how you can use them to benefit what you're working on, the challenges you're having.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is for everyone who's listening in right now. I'm assuming most of them are data teams. Let me know in the comments if you're not in data. I'd be surprised to see that most of my audience here are data folks. So for those who are either a data leader or part of a data team, what are some steps that they can take today, or well, it's late in the day for some people, tomorrow morning? What can they start to do to sort of start controlling that narrative effectively?
I would say starting to write things down. So and sharing, right? So it's becoming more visible about what you're providing and not take it as like you trying to show off or trying to show how great you are, but it's just like writing down, okay, what did I work on today and why did I do that? Who do I need to share with? Either maybe I can just share with my leader first. If I have one-on-ones, I can share with my leader and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is why I'm working on this, why it's important. Like start with that in terms of just a very basic conversation, and then starting to have regular conversation with stakeholders. So if you're working on a project for a business leader, like how much direct interaction do you have with that person? Maybe it's once a month, once a quarter. So how do you start to share and kind of talk about, okay, this is what we're working on? It's kind of like status reports, but making it a little more personable, where it's, okay, this is what we're working on. This is why we're working on this. We want to confirm that this is so important to you. So I think just starting from day one, just starting to just like write things down, be kind of a scribe, and
Mm-hmm.
then sharing that with people and saying, okay, this is what's going on. You'll realize quickly, either you get like, hey, this, thanks a lot, this is very helpful. I didn't know you guys were doing that. I wasn't aware this is a challenge you're having. So I think then you start to get the feedback, and then it kind of starts to go in kind of a different feedback loop where you're sharing that. So I'll say just starting with just having conversation around just this is what I'm working on and this is why I'm doing that, and then just start to evolve.
And how detailed do you think that conversation should go? Like, do you need to show them your Python script? Do you need to like
Yeah, I think
share them?
one of the first laws of person speak is like know your audience. So I think
Yeah.
you have to know your audience and say, okay, how much detail do I need to give them before it's too much, and they don't need to know that. I mean, there's always different steps, and you think about our friends in IT and networking, like I don't need to know about the different Azure tenant and networking protocols. Like I just need to know that I can log into my server and or log into the cloud. So I don't need to know some of that. So I think it's the same where as you go higher up the steps, I think there's less and less detail, and you kind of better summarize and give framing around. Okay, this is what this is the problem we're facing, and this is the solution. But less and less detail given your audience and what they can understand.
Yeah, I guess what you said already, the most important thing to highlight is the why you're working on this and sort of the
Right.
actual business impact that it's having. because in one of my roles, we were focused on data quality. Oh, it was brutal. Most of it, honestly, was just people not filling out Salesforce the proper way. And it was just like,
I have a
that was a big.
presentation I do about that. I talk about data governance. One of my slides says that is like it's about Salesforce and is how like most of our data quality initiatives around just like trying to pull reports out of Salesforce that are blank and going to talk to salespeople about filling in Salesforce. And like, guys, they don't care. They do it just as enough in Salesforce so they close the deal and they get their bonus. Like they will put just enough data in there to do that part of it.
Just
The
to
rest
move,
of it,
just
they
to
don't
click
care.
next, just to click next and get it to the next phase. Absolutely. And that was the biggest struggles. And the only way that we actually got the tens of thousands of people who had to get their data in correctly was to communicate the importance of the report and the data quality and the fact that decisions are made on bonuses and salaries and future planning and budgets based on the quality of those reports. Like, here, we're expecting to close these 20 deals in the next 10 days based on the data that we were provided. But what if there were 300 deals supposedly that were just not reported? Once we communicated that to the higher ups, who went to the higher ups, and then they sort of came down and send that message out like, hey, everyone, get your stuff together and get it right, then you could start to see the improvement in data quality, because there's so much a data team can do, and try to follow up with every single person and say, hey, you're missing some stuff.
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care. They're like, I don't want to. I already know their email. Why do I need to put in their email? I already know it. I already know their phone number. I already know their last name. Why do I have to put in their last name when I know Sally's last name? I talk to her all the time. Why do I need to put that in there?
Who cares if they're 50 Sallys? It doesn't matter, man. I know it's this Sally.
Yeah. But to your point, though, if you're like, yeah, if you guys put the information in here, we can better forecast our sales. We're going to hit our quota. Because if we don't hit our quota, they're going to lay people off. So if you want a job, you should put the data in there so they can make sure that we keep enough salespeople on staff, because we're anticipating all these deals. Like that's the part where I think we have to better share and say, okay, this is the whys around. We want you to put this stuff in there because it helps you all stay employed here, because we can forecast, how effective we are.
Exactly. And then also accountability, right? So in some cases, the owner of that account was not necessarily the same person who would go into their laptop and type in the information. They would hand it down to 3 levels below them and say, hey, submit this in Salesforce. Here's the bare minimum. And now that person just simply doesn't know Sally's last name and would struggle and have to go back. So it is about communicating to the right people, making sure those people communicate to the people who are actually doing the job. It's so complicated. Yeah, I'm so glad I'm at that.
It's always about finding the person who actually responsible, right? Because you go through many levels just to find like the actual person who's responsible for the challenges you're having. Because you think you're talking to the right person, and you realize that wasn't the right person. Like they're a proxy for like 3 other levels, and you're like, okay, that's most of our jobs, is trying to find the right people to talk to and finally getting that person.
Yes, exactly. We had a question here from Neha. She's asking, what's the best way to explain or tools to use to explain data literacy, data pipelines to higher ups from your past experiences?
Tools I would stay away from. That kind of gets into the sausage, like how the sausage is made. I think like I mentioned, you kind of talk in their language. You share, what the benefits are. So here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's the benefit, and here's when you're going to get it. Do they need to know if you're using Power BI versus Tableau, or if you're using, Data.World versus Calibra versus something else? Like it depends on the level. Some people need to know that, some people don't. So I think, like I said, it goes back to knowing your audience and then figuring out, do they need to know what tool we're using, or they just want the benefit? Like, I don't care about, if I'm using different services. I just want to watch a football game. I don't care if it's YouTube TV versus Sling versus Rabbit Ears. I just want to watch the Super Bowl on Sunday. So you kind of think about, how, like, what is the benefit they're trying to get? And like, do they need to know the hows before, or they just need to know what, and then when do I get it? So I think that's the trick, is understanding the levels and how much do they need to know, because sometimes at a certain level, like they don't need to know that. So you're wasting your time trying to share that, put that in the appendix.
Yeah. And I guess it's a balance, right? Because we started the conversation with how data teams don't talk enough about their work. And it could be because it's maybe so complex and can go over people's heads, or you're afraid to get into the details Because most people say, hey, speak their language, don't get into the details. But what might result if you sort of keep skipping over not the tools that you're using, but maybe some of the complexities of the work that you're dealing with, it sounds like your job is pretty easy. And it's like, oh, well, Aaron's going to do this in 10 minutes because you never get into the details. So it's sort of like a balance that I don't even know how you strike that balance.
Yeah, that's the ultimate question. I think that comes through experience. You get your hand slapped. Like this is not easy, right? This is a lot of it's full contact sports where you're gonna get your hand slapped. Someone's gonna kind of send you a chat message saying, hey, like you probably should have did this or that. So I mean, a lot of it's also cultural where it depends on the business you're in, the leadership structure, and those relationships. So it really is. There's no one size fits all. You kind of have to. I would say you should try though. Like the moral of the story is you should at least try, make an attempt to. It's not going to be easy. You will get kind of pushback and someone may slap your hand, but you need to be in the race. You need to at least be playing the game and like make an attempt.
Yeah, exactly. And it might, people might learn after the first couple of sessions and be able to understand a bit more of what you do. So that education factor where you take them on that journey. Because again, every team is working on something that the other teams don't quite understand.
Right.
As long as you can relate it to exactly how it maybe impacts them or the bigger picture, how it impacts the business, then pretty much good to go to keep talking, right?
Right. They just want to see progress. I'm going to get there. Here's the vision. You're going to get this thing in 6 months. You're going to get updates every single month, but you're going to get this thing. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to make sure I keep you updated on when you're going to get it. They may not care how they get there, but they just want to know that there's a benefit, there's a vision, there's a solution at the end of it. And they're going to get some kind of tangible benefit, which is the reason why they're investing money, time, resources, people into this.
Yeah. So one of my final questions for you, Aaron, is do you think the data teams are in a better position this year than they were, let's say, 2-3 years ago in terms of, are we closer to controlling the narrative than we were before?
I think we're kind of in the same boat. I think I think we have these initiatives that keep people interested in us, or say AI is another opportunity for the business.
Did you just say AI, Aaron? We talked about this.
It's like I said, it's a catch-all term that keep people interested. So we have opportunities to make sure we're still changing the narrative. We just need to make sure we keep our eyes on the prize and not let some of these things kind of veer us off. So like, okay, don't get so involved with AI, get involved with like, okay, what's the benefit that something's going to give the business and how do we talk about it?
Well, you know what? I do think that AI is bringing the data team to the forefront because everyone's like, I want to use AI. And they're like, well, let's look at the data, right? So,
right. That may be your way to get a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Even though you may not talk exactly about that, but at least it's going to get people interested to talk to you that may not normally talk to you. So it's an opportunity. Yeah.
There was actually a question about AI from Melody here. Can we use AI to provide the narrative?
I would say a lot of the use cases I do see is more like summaries. So I see it a lot in meeting summaries. So I think it can help you, but I would not trust it on itself. I think it can provide you some of those talking points or those meeting notes, but I would still kind of give it much more of a personal touch to it in your own language. It's just that maybe it could be a helper. It can help you out.
Yes. And I had Seth Dobrin on the show. Was it a couple of days ago? Honestly, I start to forget. Things move so fast. I think it was actually yesterday. So he says there is no AI if you don't have data. And I think you're right. This is a great way to get a path to the seat at the table where they want to use AI, they need data, and like, oh yeah, we have data, but let's look at our data quality and what data governance do we have around that, plus the AI models. And I think the data teams are being highlighted thanks to this.
Yeah, it's the connection, right? We have initiatives. AI powers the growth initiatives, but data powers AI and data quality. So it's like if you want AI, you need to improve data quality. So like that's the carrot you dangle. It's like if you want this, you need to do this first, and that'll get you there. So it's like it could help, depending upon if it's actually achievable and possible. That's another thing. Got to keep that in mind.
Who actually likes carrots, though? Like, I'm just saying, we keep saying that's the carrot. Like, I don't remember last time I had a carrot as a treat.
Good point. My kids like baby carrots, though. They do like the little tiny ones
Baby
in the
carrots
bag.
are nice. Yeah,
Yep, there you
they
go.
might
Or
need to
let's
change
say
that
baby
phrase.
carrots.
There's the ice cream. I don't know. Like, what do people like these? Coffee.
Carrot.
I would definitely use coffee. That
There you
would
go.
be
Cookie or carrot cake, maybe. Dangle the carrot cake.
carrot cake is getting better. But Aaron, before we wrap, I just want to ask, where can people go to learn more about what you're working on, follow you? Is there a website, a blog, LinkedIn? What do you prefer?
Yeah, I'll say LinkedIn. I post pretty heavily on LinkedIn, engage a lot with folks. So definitely feel free to follow me and connect on LinkedIn. All these things I talked about in our session time today, I talk about pretty regularly on LinkedIn. I am working on putting together a newsletter if I stop being lazy. So
Don't be
I am
lazy.
working on that to kind of start to more formal thoughts around this. So but I'll say definitely LinkedIn is a great start because that's where you can find me.
Where's the newsletter going to be hosted? Is it like a LinkedIn newsletter or Medium or something else?
It may be Substack. I know a lot of
Hmm.
people are using Substack lately, so that's the question now. Is like you have Medium, you have Substack, LinkedIn. So I'm leaning towards Substack. That's where a lot of people are putting theirs.
I have a Substack too. I love it. I actually have 2 drafts open that I need to work on today, so I can't wait to share those. It's fun. It's fun for sure. They have a nice user interface.
Yeah, that's what I've seen so far. So I think definitely by the end of March, right around Easter, I think I'll finally have it ready to go.
Okay, you've got a month and a half. You can do it. Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for being on the DATAcated Show. Thanks to the live audience who joined us and watched the session live and asked questions. And as always, everybody stay DATAcated. I will see you online.
All right. Thanks for having me.